So basically, Wendy, from your perspective, what do you think the biggest challenges are for being selected as a new supplier to a major retailer for a toy company, and what's the best approach to actually get the attention of a buyer in the first place?
I think we'd all agree that it's incredibly difficult to actually get noticed and to actually get a buyer to even give you a meeting. So what I would absolutely advise is to stand out from the crowd and not to be afraid to be different. In fact, it's essential to be different. Buyers are getting 200 plus emails a day, so it's all too easy just to ignore an email, to be honest, particularly if it's from a company that you don't know, even though they might have the best thing to hit the market. So it's essential to really try and be a bit different, to step out from the crowd. And those suppliers that I remember the most are very much those that did things differently. I would absolutely say break the norm, don't just email, don't just ring through, but to make a very different approach so that you get noticed. And I think we'd all agree with, when inventors go onto Dragon's Den and they're a bit braver to do things differently, then they certainly get remembered that much better. In terms of the challenges, I mean, there's an awful lot, ahead of you. No one can pretend or believe it's going to be easy, but and it is increasingly difficult. I think the biggest challenge of all is actually breaking in as a new supplier directly. Retailers are absolutely trying to rationalise their supplier base wherever possible, because it costs an awful lot of money and time to have suppliers on their books. So they're trying to cut back on the number of suppliers that they're working with, have strategic partners to therefore get better return, for their time and investment in all aspects. So it's crucial that you do find a great partner to work with as a distributor, who can take all of that pain away from you in terms of sales and marketing side of things, which is crucially important for any retail buyer, and to really allow them to do that for you. Because if you have ideas of trying to break into it yourself, it's going to be a very, very difficult struggle.
What advice would you give to toy and game inventors?
I think, well, for us personally, we actually have an own brand department at Firebox. So it's quite common for us to work quite closely with inventors from a very early stage, through development. So I think probably the core part of that for us would be that it has to be a product that is on brand. I think Firebox, our tagline is not for everyone. So we're quite a different retailer, different from your Amazons or wherever else. So the product really needs to fit within the Firebox remit. So if you can kind of come to us with a proposal or a suggestion for something that kind of sits within that, then we're all ears, and we're more than happy to provide advice and help on developing that product.
Thanks. And then Becky, from your perspective, what would you say to?
I'm probably going to address a couple of don'ts rather than anything else. This is something that will turn me off picking it up. If it's obviously something that I already have on my shelf, I mean, I am primarily in board games rather than toys, so I'm addressing I don't want yet another trivia game. I do want something innovative. You've got to be able to convince me why it's going to have space on my limited shelves and almost what it's going to replace, because I do not have the budget to be able to do everything I want to do. The more individuals I have to deal with as opposed to a distributor, the less likely I am to pick things up unless they are absolutely amazing. And recommendations to me are a very strong thing. If it's coming from a distributor we already trust, or via another inventor we've already got a relationship with, I am much, much more likely to give it the time to go, is this something that will sit on my shelves? And for heaven's sake, don't package them in pyramids, don't package them in round things. It's quite likely, if it's a game, to go end on the shelf, so make really, really sure that your graphics people put the name of the game down the side so I can display it, as well as the wonderful frontage. Because really, shelf space is absolutely at a premium.
Speaking as someone who's sat in front of quite a few scary buyers pitching, certainly from a toy company's perspective, it's probably the hardest thing that you will do. And this is a relatively soft kind of interface with retail we've had here. It's a tough game. So I think from an Inventors perspective, my own advice would be, why is the retailer going to list it over someone else, as Becky said, and then why is the consumer going to take it off? And if you don't answer that question before you present it to the toy company, you're basically giving them that problem to solve, and it probably decreases your odds of success a little bit more. But to move on to the consumer side, Amanda. So I guess for these guys to understand how children are, how they interact with each other, how they play with their families is probably quite an important thing. So what would you like to say to Inventors with regards to play patterns and trends and that kind of thing?
I'd say do your research. It's amazing how many toys don't do well because they've got a mismatch between the age you're marketing it to and some of the skills needed in the toy or the play pattern. So make sure you do your research and find out, watch children play with your toys, and make sure that you are aware of how children play. Like Wendy was saying earlier, kids don't play with toys the way you think. They don't read the instructions. They get their toys and they play with it how they want to play with it. And once you've seen children play with your toys, you're much better placed to pitch your toy to the distributors or the retailers. So understanding how children interact with your toy and what they get from it developmentally, how it helps them develop is really important.
Great, thanks. So and then I guess a question to probably all of you, whoever wants to answer this one. Obviously, technology is ever changing, and you can see in the toy industry that it's kind of it's a large part of the product ranges that companies have. In terms of any inventors who are out there, how important do you think it is for them to be focused on technology-driven items versus traditional play patterns?
Fundamentally, John, we passionately believe in balancing the play diet. So it's really important that children have access to a wide range of things, but technology is becoming increasingly important and an increasingly large part of children's play. So I do think if you are an inventor and you're bringing out another wooden toy, it's sort of been done, and unless there's something really different about it, if you can bring technology into play and have that technology enhance the play value, not just putting some lights and bells and whistles on something for the sake of it, but if you can use technology cleverly to improve children's play and improve things like the sociability of the play and all the things that technology gets a bad press about, so sociability, active play, interactive play with other children, that can really help enhance the offering because it becomes new and innovative and it's using technology well rather than just sort of me-tooing the toys.
It is for certain. It's important. I mean, when you look at apps, for example, like being able to tie apps into board games and things like that, that's a really clever way of changing something that's more traditional into something that's maybe more 21st century. But that's not to say that standard board games or toys are off the shelf. They're definitely not. There's still a lot of longevity in those kind of products. But I think it's just the toy, like you were saying, it has to be something that's new and different to what's already out there, whether that's technological or not.
Great.
From a retail point of view, if your invention requires that you have an iPad in order to use it, any retailer that does not have an iPad is at a disadvantage selling it. So factor this into your point of sale and things like that is the only thing I would say on that one. And definitely board game apps have shown a massive increase in board game sales rather than sort of why would I buy the big box because I've got the app. It works the other way around. I'm very pleased with Days of Wonder. They're brilliant.
Remember that there are retailers that do prefer very traditional play. I mean, I'm currently doing a contract with a retailer who focuses exactly on that, that they're not interested in technology, to be honest. It's just not their customer base. So don't be sort of of the opinion that it has to have that the latest must have whistles and bells with it, because that really isn't the case. There's absolutely a very strong place for traditional play in the toy market, and certain retailers will actively seek those out. So please don't be disheartened if you haven't got technology based into your products.
Hello, my name's Adam. I'd just like to ask how toy and app sales have gone. A lot of toys nowadays try and get some kind of apps into them somehow. I'd just like to know how well they sell and if you really think there should be apps included with a lot of new brands and everything, or just how well they sell really, because I know that some app included toys haven't done that well recently.
Shall I take that one? Specifically on board games, probably the best case study for success is Days of Wonder with their Ticket to Ride apps. They have, at most points, they will release the app at a normal board game price of, I think it's about $1.99, and then about once every 6 months, 9 months, they will go, for 1-2 days this is free, and then over the following 3 to 6 months I tend to see an uptick in sales of the actual physical board game. This is because it's directly tied to it. On all of the Cartamundi based app versions of things, I don't have as much data because I've generally not done them because the high street's doing, but those are going well. But any toy or game where the app is not an integral part of it, just having an app isn't necessarily any kind of bonus to sales at my level of retail, which is single independent shop, so single data point.
I think it depends on how well the toy and the app integrate. If the app is the same play pattern, along the same lines, it has the same ethos as the toy, and you can see how they work together, I think the toys and the apps, the toys app sales work well. I think the times when it's not worked well is when somebody's just sort of said, oh, we need an app, and they've done an app and it's had very little relationship to the actual toy or the play.
I mean, I think I've worked with quite a lot of past technologies which sadly came and went, much to my chagrin, but the reality is it comes down to the experience, and each technology platform has its pros and cons, but it comes down to the play experience, and exactly like Amanda said, if it's a bad experience it won't work. In terms of purely, I don't know if I'm, or perhaps anyone here is the best to talk in terms of pure chart sales success, but the kind of the app toys category, and someone tell me I'm wrong, but it hasn't really taken over to the degree that past categories have. So I think there's a kind of a secondary reason for that perhaps, which is that there's almost an attachment issue. There's a separation between one device and a product. You have to rely on the consumer to put them together to actually play it, and that seems to be a significant barrier.
I've been in the UK games market for 44 years, and my latest board game is going into production next week, if I'm still around. And I want to make this point clear. I believe that UK consumers of board games have, for many, many years, been sold down the river. Why? Because the vast majority of board games produced in the UK are based on television series or programs. Now, the vast majority, in fact, no, I won't hesitate, all of the game-based television programs are based on games of chance. And to me, because I try to design games with a limited amount of chance, and my games are based mostly based on skill, this is selling them down the river. I perfectly understand why the retailers stock these games, because of course they're emblazoned with television program names which consumers are familiar with. But in terms of buying those games, they're getting sold down the river. That won't stop them, I hope, buying my new game, which is called Velodrome.
I hope everybody got that name. I mean, I guess I used to work for a games company. I guess the reality is, games companies will publish what sells, and board games based on game shows have traditionally sold very well, but there's obviously a market for other types of games. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to add that, for us, popular culture is a massive angle for products in general, not just toys and games, but any kind of merchandise. And I think, like you say, it's just something that consumers really tap into. If they feel very passionately about that TV show or whatever it is, that they just, you know, they want to buy everything about it, or they just really get into it. So I'd say that's probably why sometimes it seems that those games are maybe picked over other games. But yeah, that's not to say that, you know, like say at Firebox, for example, that we wouldn't sell games that have no ties. You know, we do sell a lot of traditional board games and things that are maybe even trivia based, not just you know, not just on chance, but also rely on your own skills. So yeah, so that's definitely still really important for us.
You're not going to address the trend of everybody buys Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. What you can do is work with really good game designers to make your licensed product a really good game as well. And then you've got two strong points to sell it on rather than just the name.
I mean, I think one of the additional answer to that is, I think it's horses for courses. You know, if you go to a kind of toy game company that does game show based games and you try and sell them something which is not in their type of product, then obviously that's a very tough sell. But in the world there are probably better markets for that type of product in terms of pure, you know, gamers games.
Point about the board game and an app. Would Scrabble and Words with Friends be a good example?
Scrabble is one of those things that has sold for decades, will continue to sell for decades. There's, as I understand it, a really interesting position between Hasbro and Mattel over joint ownership and licensing, and mostly I don't tend to worry about that, but it's got top of mind recognition. The name has absolutely, Scrabble is Scrabble is Scrabble, Words with Friends is Scrabble, but they can't use the name. And honestly, I'm usually more interested in things like bananagrams and that take a different approach to Scrabble, because Scrabble has the category sewn up. Trying to be the next Scrabble is definitely a losing streak as far as I'm concerned.
I would also add that I kind of think that ties like that can work really well if, you know, you're adding to the sociability of a game, you're adding to the on the move element. You know, so many people are, you know, stuck on public transport every day, commuting or whatever it is, that you can't get a Scrabble board out on your morning commute. You can barely stand. So yeah, so things like that I think can actually be a really good way of bringing a game to a market that is, you know, looking for something to do in that time. So I think there can be interesting tie-ups, but I think they just have to be really well thought through. And yeah, the sociability element, you know, getting your friends to play with you and things like that, I think that's, you know, really important, because the more people that play your game, hopefully the more people buy into it. So yes.
Cool. We've got an audience interjection at that point.
I don't want to take over the panel, but this is actually a really, really important question, because there's actually a learning that Hasbro had that I'd like to share with you guys. I'm going to stand up. So Words with Friends obviously came from a game called Scrabulous, which was designed and developed for Facebook. And then obviously they went and started Zynga, and then they did Words with Friends, and it became hugely popular. Then Hasbro decided that we would partner with Zynga and create the physical games for it. And one thing here that we learned throughout it, which I think you guys can really benefit from, is our Words with Friends line didn't perform well in the market. The reason behind this is that Words with Friends players, despite being vastly, very big user base, monthly, daily active users, it was huge. But the difference between people who are playing social games online doesn't necessarily translate to physical game sales. So sometimes you have to pay in mind, if you're looking at trends on digital and online, yes, it's gaming, and I see gaming as a whole part. I think digital gaming and casual gaming can live side by side with tabletop gaming, such as what happens with Days of Wonder and Ticket to Ride, which works very well. But you have to be careful sometimes that there's different experiences that people are after. Words with Friends was very much, it was very much females from the age of sort of 25 upwards that were doing that. Mothers playing it as well. Whereas the Scrabble type, Scrabble is kind of ubiquitous now. So just to make that difference, and that was just something that Hasbro has learned the hard way in a sense, but you guys can kind of benefit from it. So it's also looking at your consumer who you're developing for as well.
What percentage now is going towards internet purchase as against retail outlet purchase? I mean, surely is the internet gradually increasing as year on, and the retail high street is coming down?
I would just quickly say Firebox is an online-only retailer, so yeah, we don't have any kind of physical bricks and mortar stores and things like that. But I think if you were to speak to anyone in our buying team or our marketers, they would tell you that we definitely do have a pickup of like internet sales are continuing to grow and become stronger and stronger, especially when you're looking at Christmas peaks and things like that. I think a lot of people feel more and more comfortable with shopping online. So yeah, but I can't obviously speak for bricks and mortar stores.
The internet side of things is growing dramatically and is showing a far greater growth than that of bricks and mortar. But equally, there's still a very strong case for an awful lot of products that actually sell better through a traditional bricks and mortar type retailing, and therefore, as far as I'm concerned, there'll always be a strong case for both. But there's no doubt the internet is becoming a bigger force, and in certain categories is definitely driving a bigger sector of the market in certain categories, others not. So we need both.
There are toys that when you demonstrate them and you see the kids playing with them, the sales rocket through the roof. But there are other toys that you can see, you can get what they do, and there's just from an image on a screen, and those toys, they sell really well online. But the ones that need the demoing, you still need the shops, you still need the hands-on experience and the sort of try before you buy.
Let's get to the panel. Thanks for listening, and thanks Sam.